Man, we got a battle between a couple of teams who are very much alive in their season aspirations, but have yet to really put a complete game together versus a quality opponent. This game, as many have been on A&M's schedule so far, comes as an opportunity to take the next step in becoming who you are in Mike Elko's year one. But while we've seen progress, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, the team has yet to take that jump. The home game versus Missouri gives you a chance to sharpen your tools versus a top 10 team, but winning it would not only solidify A&M's chances of overachieving in year one under Mike Elko, but would really just buy them some time to continue that improvement in that trajectory. You have a bye week after this game, you have Mississippi State, and then you're back home in Kyle Field versus LSU. You give yourself about 4 weeks of practice of just improvement if you're able to survive this first half of the season. But for Missouri, this game is a chance to get that taste out of your mouth of two too close for comfort games versus decent teams at home, Boston College and Vandy. But with the aspirations the Tigers had on the 2024 season, the Tiger faithful are left desiring a little bit more out of the team. They have a chance to get just that versus a ranked conference opponent on the road. The game opened with A&M as a 3-point favorite and quickly dwindled down to a 1.5 spread in favor of the Aggies, Sharps hammering the points given to Missouri on the road, but now currently sits with A&M as a 2-point favorite. Vegas has been high on A&M the whole season, since the offseason where they sat as favorites in 11 out of 12 games, including this one. And though A&M hasn't particularly thrived in their 4-game winning streak, they remain a favorite. And that's largely in part of Missouri's inconsistent play so far on the year. So let's talk about this game. Talk about what the game means for both teams and the rest of season outlook for both teams. Give a scouting report for Missouri and A&M and key matchups to the game, and also just keys to the game and paths to victory. And yes, I'm an Aggie, but I'll give Missouri their paths to victory against us as well. And at the end of this video, I'll give you my official prediction and score prediction. I picked Missouri when I was doing my preseason predictions for the year. So we'll see if I stick to that. I think it's going to be a game time decision. I'll decide as I'm discussing these teams throughout the video. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that at the end of the video. But thank you so much for being here. Drop a like, drop a sub if you like this kind of content. I really appreciate it. Tell a friend. Share this video with an Aggie or a Missouri friend. I'm trying to grow this thing, bring as many college football fans together as we can. I really appreciate you guys being here. But most importantly, comment your thoughts on this game. Comment your score prediction. I want to hear from you guys. Thank you for being here. So let's start with the importance of this game for Missouri, who currently sits at 4-0. They started their season with 2 easy opponents, Murray State, Buffalo at home, performed well in both games, fine. I think there were some signs of deficiencies to come, but it wasn't bad. I mean, you took care of business versus both teams. But then kind of struggled versus Boston College and Vandy, not performing to their standard that they set for themselves based on last year and based on their expectations going into this year. With one of the easiest schedules in the SEC, which they do have because they play at UMass after this game, after those first 4 games I just mentioned, A&M is again a must-win game for their opponent, just like it was for Florida, Arkansas, and Notre Dame. For Florida, A&M was one of those early games at home while the season was still alive that they really had to win to hit their ceiling on their very daunting season. For Arkansas, similar situation. They had their SEC win versus Auburn. If they could get the game versus A&M, which looked to be manageable for them, they had a chance to go 500 in the SEC. Tough slate down the road, but if they could have beat A&M and they could have pulled 1 or 2 more games, it could have been big for them. And Notre Dame, who was able to get the win, obviously their schedule was pretty easy too, outside of that early road test, first week of the year versus A&M. They won it, then they stumbled. Now they're on thin margins again. But A&M, again, comes as a manageable opponent that could really go either way. It's like a quality but manageable, yet somewhat respectable kind of opponent. Especially in Mike Elko's year one, you really feel like you can get A&M, and I'm sure Missouri feels the same way right now. They need a good performance for that schedule because they have at Alabama, at South Carolina, home versus Arkansas, home versus OU down the stretch, and if they win this game, they really have 2 SEC mulligans down that home stretch of the season, and that bodes really, really well for their chances of making the playoff or even finding their way into the SEC championship game if they only drop that game at Alabama, which looks to be very, very solidly their toughest game on the year. So it's an important game for both teams once again. And for A&M, managed to stay alive after dropping the week 1 game versus Notre Dame. They're 2-0 in SEC play with wins over Florida and Arkansas. Obviously, it's a year one, and things aren't really clicking for A&M as a whole. And I think they'll clearly need time to find their stride, particularly offensively. However, the defense has really started to come on, particularly after that game versus Arkansas, where they really played their most complete game. This game versus Missouri not only represents a chance to get a top 10 win under their belts, as they have no ranked wins on the year so far. Missouri actually beat a ranked Boston College, so give them credit there. But it represents a chance to take that next step offensively. But more than that, like I was mentioning earlier, if they can just survive and win an ugly game between two teams who aren't really clicking yet, if they can just eke out a win, they buy their time for improvement over the next few weeks, culminating in that home showdown versus LSU. And I predicted A&M would be 4-1 going into this game, which has come true. And then I called this game kind of the hinge point on the year, where if you're going to hit your upper echelon goals for the year, 9-10 wins, which is, tough to do in a year one, especially in the SEC. But if you win this game, those chances are very, very much alive, especially with the time you have for improvement coming right up. So you want to hit that high marker. This is one you win at the midpoint of the year. And if you want to call it 2 mulligans to get to 9 wins after this in the second half of the year, that's fine. You really only have 1 mulligan if you want to somehow sneak into the playoff. Either way, must win to hit those upper echelon goals. You're feeling pretty good if you win this game, because your main matchups down the stretch of the year are home games versus LSU and Texas, and then road games versus South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Auburn. Most of those games seem pretty winnable. The Texas game at the end of the year will exist in a vacuum because of the rivalry situation. But home versus LSU's not really clicking. On the road versus South Carolina is definitely a challenge. On the road versus Auburn is always a challenge. But A&M has a chance to win those games. Mississippi State is very much a down opponent. But it's really a huge game for both programs, which again is what we've been saying about a lot of A&M's games so far in the year. But now they've kind of set the stage, let's get into the Missouri Tigers, who are now in year 5 under Coach Eli Drinkowitz and really broke through for the first time last year, capping off their 10-win season in a bowl win versus Ohio State. And what gave people so much hope and hype about the Missouri Tigers and earned them a preseason top 10 ranking is the sheer amount of offensive weapons they had returning. They pretty much brought their offensive crew back. The headliners were obviously Luther Burden and quarterback Brady Cook. Both returned, as well as a stable of quality receivers, including Mookie Cooper and Theo Weiss. They also returned 3 O-linemen from center to the right side of the line, rebuilding the left side through the portal. And though they lost heart and soul running back Cody Schrader, they bring back quality transfers Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll at running back. Both have been very productive in the short season and probably the brightest aspect of their offense so far. They bring back a starter at tight end. But with all that returning production and quality pieces added out of the transfer portal, the Missouri offense expected to hit the ground running in the 2024 season. But after the 2 tune-up games that they started the year with, and then the 2 manageable home opponents, they really haven't done that yet, and that comes at the surprise of the Missouri faithful. The O-line, while not terrible as a unit, has really lacked consistency, specifically on that left side of the unit that's been rebuilt through the portal, and also just looking a little bit soft at times, allowing defensive tackles to just kind of push guards into the backfield, blowing plays up. Kind of lacked some stiffness at times on that offensive line. Now, they have a lot of room for improvement. They were really good last year, but they really haven't been consistent. They've had trouble getting Luther Burden as involved in the offense as they would like. They've been a pretty heavily penalized team. They've been surprisingly lacking in the explosive play department. They struggle scoring inside the 10-yard line, but they've really leaned on that running back tandem to find consistent production, which has been good for them. But I think the center of all those problems for them has been a little bit of regression from Brady Cook. He's not been pushing the ball down the field. He's kind of been a check-down merchant for the early portion of the season, and even in the gimmies. He's had some accuracy and consistencies. It's been really strange to see, just missing open wide receivers at time. It's really been head-scratching, and the Missouri fans are wondering, what's going on? Is he hurt? Are they going through some new schematic hurdles? Like, what's going on with Brady Cook? It's been really shocking to see kind of how inconsistent he's become after being so good last year. But again, to be fair, I think the running backs have exceeded expectations on the year so far. They've been a steady force moving the ball. And that was a worry of mine regarding this team going into the year, is how they were going to replace that heart and soul player that was Cody Schrader. But the running backs have been really good. You got to be careful with Noel. He can break through the tiniest crease and has speed for days, man. A&M will certainly have to build on that dominant run-stopping defense they showed versus Arkansas. They're really good at that first wave of defense with that D-line. They're going to have to really build on that because he can just squirt to the smallest crease between the tackles and break you big time. But on that passing game, they have the weapons. They've done it before. They can get it together at any time. So you really can't just bank on them staying down. This team has shown it before. They have playmakers all over the field, and the improving yet inconsistent back seven for Texas A&M will really have their work cut out for them with this group, especially if they found some consistency in that bye week that they're coming off of. That bye week really came at a perfect time for Missouri to get things together, to organize before they have their toughest test on the year on the road. So we'll talk more about the matchup between the A&M defense and their offense in just a second. Let's talk about their defense real quick, give a little scouting report there. And I'll be honest, this is a group that I was not high on going into the year. In fact, when I did my playoff predictions, I had the defense being the reason Missouri wins 9 games instead of 10 on the year and missing the playoffs despite the returning offensive pedigree. If you didn't know, Missouri lost a ton off of this defense this past offseason, and not just players. The defensive coaching staff was heavily poached by LSU in their full defensive revamp. Defensive coordinator Blake Baker, defensive end coach Kevin Peoples, who coached them to a top 11 finish in sacks last year. Safeties and linebacker coach, he's coached both at Missouri, Jake Olson, who has 2 all-SEC linebackers under his belt, all at LSU now. And on top of that, they lost 8 key defenders going into the year, including their 3 best defensive backs, their best edge rusher, and 3 out of 4 of their interior D-line rotation. But having said all that, they really haven't been a huge liability thus far in the year. Now, they've given up their share of explosive they'll have to watch out for, but they're definitely not as good as last year. They have been playing well enough to win games, especially with what they have on that offensive side of the ball. They're a pretty good statistical defense right now. They added some nice pieces in the portal. Zion Young at defensive end out of Michigan State will start. He's a big dude. He's a big force, athletic guy at defensive end. Defensive tackle Chris McKellen out of Florida is a menace. He's a very mean, tough player on the interior. Toriano Pride out of Clemson will start for them at DB. And their best returning player, defensive end Johnny Walker, will definitely test the offensive line. It's a really big physical defensive line. And I would say it's fairly similar to what A&M faced in Arkansas last week, who was just huge, physical, athletic, but maybe not as experienced as a unit as Arkansas's was. Now, this DB group seems to be one that's still figuring things out. Both Boston College and Vandy were able to get some explosive plays over their heads. So I'd once again look for A&M to take their fair share of shots to test this defense like they did versus Arkansas, although they weren't able to connect on the plays that were there. So we'll have to see if that A&M's really good offensive line can rise to the challenge of stopping that pretty physical front, but also challenge them downfield where it's a newer unit and see if they're really ready to stop some explosives. But A&M has to connect on them. They haven't done that so far in the year. But quickly, talking about A&M, let's get into a quick scouting report there. If you follow me, you know my thoughts on A&M. Let's talk about their defense. The defense seems to be making some tangible strides. After not finishing that Florida game how you would have hoped, they were really good in the first half. They started the second half pretty good, but in that fourth quarter, they really got complacent, let some play-action plays get over their heads, really gave up a lot. I think we saw the most complete defensive game top to bottom versus Arkansas, outside of that early explosive play that Arkansas had on A&M's defense. But that was by way of a really good play by Taylon Green, who extended the play, really physical, big player who broke the tackle of A&M's defensive line, extended the play, found the receiver who broke off his route deep. But outside of that, the secondary really played their best game on the year, largely bottling up Arkansas's pretty strong receiver group. I mean, you really have some emergences at corner right now. Des Ricks, 5-star talent, transfer out of Alabama in his first college action, was the A&M player of the week defensively, really breaking out and coming into his own right about now. Now, he's not a perfect player yet. He's a young dude who you'll take some lumps with his play, but he's just a really, really good coverage guy. Just really athletic, really good ball skills. You're really happy to see him coming on right before this Missouri game where he'll really be tested. And then Will Lee is really looking like an NFL cornerback right now. He's been so good on the year. After a down game versus Bowling Green, his only bad game on the year, he really played his best game versus Arkansas and played really well against a really, really strong possession receiver in Andrew Armstrong. So you're really happy about that corner duo. Linebackers, you're getting better play out of your linebacker group, who had been pretty subpar up into this game versus Arkansas so far. And then defensive line, that whole front seven, did a really good job stuffing a really strong rushing attack that Arkansas has between Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson. One of the top 15 rushing attacks in the country A&M shut it down. The defensive line was the most disruptive we have seen all year. And of all the groups on Texas A&M, the one group that has kind of seen linear improvement on the year, where it's been game on game on game, has been that A&M defensive line, that front four. Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, Albert Regis, Cassius Howell. Those 5 defensive linemen have been so good for A&M, and they're only getting better game to game. You're going to need that to continue into this Missouri game where they're really going to be tested. Offense is really a work in progress. The running game is there, but A&M has been extremely one-dimensional on the year so far. We expect the quarterback to once again be Marcel Reed. Keep an eye on injury reports for Connor Wigman. He's going to be a game-time decision yet again, but I would estimate they want to get to that bye week to give Connor those 3 additional weeks of rest before you have that Mississippi State game, where I think he truly becomes an option to play. Reed has been a pretty good player with his legs. Obviously, he adds another dimension to an offense with his athletic ability, his ability on design runs, his ability to scramble. He can make guys miss an open field. But his best attribute has been just taking care of the ball, knocking on wood. No turnovers on the year so far for Marcel Reed through 3 starts. But he has yet to facilitate a consistent passing game. Now, A&M does not have the receiver playmakers that Missouri does. But I still think A&M is more than serviceable at the position. Timing is off on passing plays, whether it's in running routes, with the quarterback, but largely it is the quarterback just settling into the game. He's a very young, raw player. He plays a little bit rushed in the pocket at times. He struggles with accuracy and consistency. He struggles with progressing through reads. He gets tunnel vision at times. And he's just not really finding rhythm with his receivers. He's in his 4th start now. Will he finally start to settle in? Now, we have seen a connection forming between him and the number 1 receiver in the group, Noah Thomas, who has brought in 11 receptions over the last 2 games, including a 65-yard touchdown versus Arkansas. But we really need to start seeing some other playmakers get involved. You do have some speed and some wiggle out there. Terry Bussey, number 2, the true freshman 5-star, needs to get the ball in space. Jabri Barber, he's healthy now, started the year hurt. He's finally at a full workload. He needs to get active. Cyrus Allen, we saw him reel off a 73-yard touchdown versus Florida. He needs to get back involved with this offense. Ja'Day Walker didn't get a reception last game. You have options at receiver, but there's just not consistency in the passing game yet. And a lot of that hinges on a young quarterback figuring things out. So I look for offensive coordinator Colin Klein to continue to mold game plans to get Reed in places where he's comfortable. Maybe he's a little bit better on the play action, roll out short stuff than he is sitting back and reading in the pocket. Maybe you lean more on that this game because you sat back and you kind of let him progress through reads a few times versus Arkansas, and only a few of those plays worked. So they're going to continue molding it to him. But I really look for this offense to continue leaning on the running game, headlined by a really good offensive line who's just blown expectations out of the water this year, been the strength of the offense, and the 3rd leading rusher in total yards in the SEC, Le'Veon Moss, who really put his stamp on that Arkansas game in the 4th quarter. You also have a good stable of backs behind him. They didn't have a great game versus Arkansas, but they've been good on the year, especially Amari Daniels, who is the backup running back on the team. And he'll get pretty equal share run opportunities as Le'Veon Moss, although Le'Veon's really developing into that guy who you want to probably get even more carries a game. So we'll see how they handle that. The running game should be there. But it's really about the next step with the offense. And the next step is finding a passing game to keep defenses honest and not be one-dimensional. Now let's talk about matchups in the game before I give my keys to the game and my score prediction. Have you liked and subbed yet? If you haven't, please do. It helps me greatly. We're going to finish this video out with matchups and all that stuff. So what's very intriguing about this game is you're kind of going strength on strength, both sides of the ball, or weakness on weakness. I would call the Aggie defense the stronger side of the ball. I would call the Missouri offense the stronger side of their ball. Missouri defense, I think, still needs to be tested versus an offense right now. It's going to happen on the road versus A&M. The Aggie offense is very much a work in progress. So let's talk about that strong side. I do think the A&M front can slow down the Missouri rushing attack after they did it against a dynamic rushing tandem versus Arkansas. A&M's run defense has steadily improved over the course of the year, where it was kind of a question coming out of that Notre Dame game. It's really been locked down over the last few games, especially inside the tackles. That's where it's really at its strongest, where that defensive line is involved. And that's kind of where the Missouri running backs have been able to squirt through between the tackles and just rail off these huge runs. So I look for A&M to be able to have some success right there because that's just where they've been strong on the year so far. I really think the Aggie defensive line can have success against their offensive line. that's weakest on the left side with the two new starters, but like I said, has been a little bit inconsistent and soft at times. I think the Aggie defensive line can really make a mess of the game between the tackles. But what is worrisome for me as an Aggie, and I think is Missouri's path to victory, is some of the misdirection sideline to sideline plays they run, where they'll roll out one way, throw the ball the other way, run plays away from motion. They'll use a lot of deception and eye candy, and I think that's where A&M's been vulnerable defensively on the year. And when you have the receiving end of those plays being players like Luther Burden, that can really wreak havoc on the weak point of A&M's defense. And the matchup on Luther Burden, who typically lines up in the slot position, is going to be A&M's weakest spot in the DB group, and that's in the nickel position. Now, you have a couple guys battling for reps there between Jaden Hill, who's kind of struggled on the year so far, and, the senior transfer, BJ Mays, who's kind of coming on right now. They're both replacing our most experienced player on the team, Tyreek Chappelle, who unfortunately went down for the year. That seems to be a vulnerability of A&M, and Missouri seems like the team to capitalize on that. I will say A&M did show improvement on that front in the recent game versus Arkansas, but it's an area that Missouri's definitely going to test A&M at. They're really going to test the Aggie eye discipline, and that's an offense that's itching for big plays. They really haven't had them on the year like they expected, but A&M's giving up explosive plays pretty consistently throughout the year. I think the only stretch where you haven't seen many were the last three quarters of Arkansas, but in every game, even the Bowling Green game, you're giving up explosives. You're having busts in the secondary. Can they build on their most recent performance? Because if not, Missouri will make them pay. Which side breaks their trend? Will Missouri find explosives, or will A&M bottle up explosives? It's a very intriguing matchup. So flipping to A&M's offense versus the Missouri defense, I would say the weaker side of the card. I think we have an interesting battle in the trenches here. We saw A&M's offensive line really struggle for the first time in the year in the middle portion of that game versus Arkansas, running the ball. Protection's been great, but running the ball, we saw them losing some battles. And Arkansas has a good run-stopping front seven of their own. Those are senior players, been around for a while in that program. They had experience together. They were big, bruising types of players. But A&M finally hit their stride in that fourth quarter. Now, Missouri has a pretty nasty and physical defensive line. I think that was one of the things that stood out to me the most when watching film on their defense. They have some huge bodies and just some mean physical dudes in there, like you would see in the SEC, but these dudes are particularly mean. The Aggie offensive line needs to pick up right where they left off in that fourth quarter versus Arkansas if they want to give this running game the juice it needs. If they pick up right where they left off, I think A&M can have success running the football. But they give up battles like they did early in that Arkansas game, that Missouri front can make them pay. But like I said, I do fully trust this offensive line in pass pro, though they do have some good pass rushers in their own right. They're going to have stand-up defensive ends pretty much the whole game. But the Aggie offensive line and the Aggie running backs have been stellar at protecting the quarterback all year. Most of the few sacks they've given up have really been by way of just quarterback hesitancy or holding onto the ball too long or taking bad angles scrambling. But again, it's going to be tested. I really like this Missouri front. But where this game can really swing, in my opinion, is A&M's passing game versus the Missouri secondary. And again, A&M's been mediocre passing the football. But every game, I feel like receivers are finding more and more separation. You're just missing guys. You're missing one-on-one opportunities. Can they take that next step? Or can this Missouri back seven really put a stamp on the year and bottle up the big plays they've been giving up through the air over their heads? It really is an opportunity for both units on this A&M passing attack versus the Missouri back seven. But now let's get into my keys to the game for both teams. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the number one priority, I think, for every side of the ball for both teams. You comment your keys to the game as well, because these are just mine. This is my opinion. For the Missouri offense, I think it's just finding quarterback consistency. I really like Missouri's play design. I really like the way they can get playmakers the ball. You just got to get the ball there. We've seen Cook miss gimme play after gimme play over and over this year. You got to connect on those, because I think these short completions can potentially punish A&M's defense in catch and run opportunities. Not been the best at corralling ball carriers outside the tackle box. So you have to connect on those plays. If Brady Cook has a consistent game, they can make this good A&M defense pay. For the Missouri defense, I think it comes down to not letting Marcel Reed get comfortable. This is a very, very young quarterback working through things. He's not been at his best under pressure or even just at the side of a blitz, even if it gets picked up. Do not let this be the game where Marcel Reed finds rhythm. Keep A&M one-dimensional and sell out for the running game, and then you have a very good chance to stop the A&M offense. For the A&M offense, kind of on the other side of that token, find ways to get Marcel Reed favorable opportunities. You have 3 games of film to lean on now if you're Colin Klein. You know where he's good. You know where he's bad. I think he's pretty good at those quick hitting plays, passing on the run and the shorter passes, play action plays, the occasional shot play. I don't think he's very good right now sitting in the pocket and reading defenses. And you need to run Reed to keep the defense honest. You don't need to explode through the air. You just need to keep them honest with your quarterback play. And then lean on that top 15 rushing offense. Let them cook, but you cannot be one-dimensional for that to happen. Now for the A&M defense, it's going to be eye discipline and play recognition in the back 7. It's been the weak point of the defense all year. Best game coming most recently, but it's been weaker all year. The Missouri offense is really going to test you here. That's where they're at their best. And their players can absolutely make you pay. Trust your assignment. Don't overcommit. Make good decisions. Take good angles. And with that, I'll give you my score prediction. I have A&M winning this game, and I know I'm biased, so take that how you will. I would feel differently about this game if Missouri was clicking on all cylinders on offense, but they just aren't. And of course, this could be the game where it all comes together for them, in which case A&M would probably lose the game. But I just don't think the Aggie defense can let that happen. It's absolutely trending in the right direction on the defensive side of the ball for A&M. And I just don't think they let Missouri get comfortable and find rhythm in this particular game when they didn't have rhythm going into the game. Of course, that bye week comes at a great time. Maybe they found something in these 2 weeks of practice. I just don't think A&M lets them get comfortable on their offensive side of the ball. So my final score prediction is 31-23, Texas A&M. I have the difference being 3 field goals for Missouri in the red zone where they've been struggling kind of inside that 10-yard line marker. A&M's defense will stiffen up in there. And this is by far the best defense they will have faced all year. So guys, with that, give me your score prediction. What are your thoughts on what I had to say about these teams? Missouri fans, am I being too hard on your team? I just don't see them clicking just yet. And I know A&M's not clicking yet, but they're at home, and I think the defense is really, really trending in the right direction. But it's going to be a close game. It could go either way. I would not be the slightest bit surprised if Missouri wins this one. But I have the Aggies at home. So guys, comment your thoughts. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. It really, really helps me. I'm just trying to grow this and bring more college football fans together. Aggies, get to this game on time. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff, which is a blessing for a road team in a raucous environment. There's a chance it's a little bit quiet in the first quarter. Get there early because those lines to get into the stadium at an 11 a.m. kickoff are brutal. Get there like at 9:30 and get to your seat. Trust me. Do your pre-gaming early. Wake up, have a mimosa, have a screwdriver, get to the game. But guys, I will see you on my Thursday live show where you guys have a chance to talk about this game. I'll let you guys do what I just did. Give me your keys to the game. Give me your breakdowns. Give me your score predictions. I'll see you Thursday at 7:30. Thanks for watching. Gig 'em.